A year ago, though, there was racial injustice in the city of Atlanta, across America, really. Here, though, the protests took place in the backdrop of this city that has a rich history in civil rights. The city's police headquarters were spray painted with the words, "Defund the police." It hit home for Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. In our recent conversation, I asked the mayor for her take on that movement, one that she says goes far beyond just a memorable slogan.
I understand the sentiment. I didn't support it, no. And the reason being, city budgets are complicated. And when I was doing interviews during the discussions in Atlanta, I would pull out our budget book. It's got 400, 500 pages in a budget book. It's not that simple. The majority of our funding for our police department goes to salary, retirement, workers' comp, and every budget is unique. So to just say slash it in this area doesn't really capture the sentiment. What I tried to explain for us, we looked at our corrections budget because we were talking about closing our jail. We eliminated cash bail bonds in the city. We ended our relationship with ICE. We have this massive 12-story facility that houses maybe 30 people a night. Our opportunity was to redeploy our corrections staff into community-based programming, to redeploy some of that money. So there was an opportunity for us to move money around in the budget, but the best opportunity was not to do it from our police budget. Because the reality is in communities of color, there are a lot of people who want the police there. There are a lot of people who believe that we should have more officers on our streets. I think everybody agrees that they want to have positive interactions with the officers on their streets. But I give the example, when I had a family member who was murdered, we called the police. The police solved his murder. So I recognize that there's this delicate line, but I also want my children and my husband and anybody in my family to have positive encounters with the police. So it's a very delicate balance, and a simple solution and a simple slogan aren't going to address those challenges.
Let me tell you something. I love how head-on and authentic she was. And yeah, it was an incredible tragedy when, you know, a young person, her family was slain. And it's not always popular for the black mayor of a city of Atlanta to not side with that movement that says we're done with the police. Defund it, let's go a different way. Rebuild it, you know, tear it, dismantle it, and bring it back to life in some other non-confrontational form. But I like that. I'm gonna tell you something, when she walked in the door, number one, she never looked more radiant. She's a beautiful woman, you know, we can all see that, but there was something, and I remarked, she had the gorgeous color on, her hair was laid, everything looked fantastic. And she said, this is peace. You know, she had made her decision. Yeah. She'd prayed about it. She's a prayerful woman. But I liked her candor, and we locked eyes for the whole interview, which is probably, I creep people out when I do that, but it was riveting, some of the things that she talked about, and you'll hear more about it. But yeah, remember, this is not just a city that she moved to. This is a city this is her city, you know? And so she does care a lot about it. Yeah, and it was a delicate balancing act, Mike. Yeah.
And you can tell she loves the city and she's passionate about it. And yeah, I think she would be at peace. She's made her decision. Now she still has to fulfill her term, and there are still issues she still wants to take care of because she wants to keep Atlanta or make Atlanta a better place than when she, you know, took over the reins as mayor. Who doesn't want to do that? You want to fulfill your term and leave it in a better position than it was before you took over. Obviously, there are a lot of things, but there are certain terms, Sharon, that I think people, and you just heard President Obama talk about misinformation. We have to do our research. We have to understand what critical race theory really is. We have to understand what defund the police really is, because there are people, politicians, Republicans usually, who throw out terms like that to scare a base. Defund the police. That means, man, there's going to be crime that's rampant up and down the street. Oh, they're going to come in your neighborhood and they're going to terrorize you and you're not going to be able to call 911. That is the issue that we're having because of the ignorance that a lot, and we'll talk about this a little bit more at the top of the hour, that they're preying off the ignorance of a base or a constituency. It doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of the police. It just means that you're going to break it down and you're going to take away some of the funds from a lot of the police who have that brute force that go into a neighborhood where sometimes you need a mental health expert, right? Right? Am I right about this?
Sure.
These are the things where you're taking these funds and you're allocating them to other places. Empathy. You're building more community centers. You're doing that means the fund. It doesn't mean that your whole police force goes away. Maybe you need to strip it down and start all over again in a sense. But yeah, you have to rebuild it.
Well,
but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to get locked up for murder or crime's going to be rampant.
Yeah.
We've seen that before in places like Camden, New Jersey. So follow the model.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, it's a delicate balancing act because Republicans didn't coin the phrase defund the police. They just co-opted it and they ran away with a lie. But that was the struggle. Remember what Representative Clyburn talked about the late, great John Lewis and the civil rights fight and the mistakes they had made in how they market it. It's sorry, folks. It's marketing. To get your point across, you market. So on the one hand, you had a movement that said this was no unforced error. We were provocative. We called it defund the police for a reason because that's what we meant. And then you had the other side, you know, President Obama, Representative Clyburn, others, Nancy Pelosi saying, we want police to change too. But you can't call it that because the messaging, we can't then go back to American public who's more USA Today than New York Times. They want the little Twitter. How many characters is it now? Right. So that's the rub. But I love the way she spoke to it. And she spoke from experience. At the end of the day, she's the mayor of Atlanta. And she'll be that through December.
Yeah.
But she's a black woman and a mother in this city too. And she had something to say. Now, I will tell you, I won't do it here, but there was one question that, you know, I asked her some tough questions too, and she gets to speak to her legacy. There was one question that I did not get to ask her that may have been, to some critics and fans, her biggest misstep of her term. Biggest misstep of her entire term. And I'll leave with that because I love her, but we got to talk about that. Okay, we have to talk about it because that too is part of Keisha Lance Bottoms' legacy. Black America's mayor. That's going to be part of her legacy too. So at some point this morning, I really do want to talk about it. And I do think, I hope we'll tweet it at her. Maybe she'll address it. Maybe she won't. But I think she has to. So I think she has to. She has to. Well, gotta keep it a buck, as you love to say. You can watch the full interview a week from today, right? In a special 2-part center stage. Yeah, I got to ask her about it, Mike. And we ran out of time, even though she gave us a lot of time. But she has got to speak to this. She has to.